We've got to talk about the extreme woman hater on season 8 of Love is Blind who uses incel talking points to neg women. David, the 33-year-old medical device salesman, was advertised to us in the trailer as being the season 8 villain, and boy oh boy did he ever deliver on that promise. From the very first episode, we see him commit to insulting the women during every single interaction. It's a bit alarming that blatantly toxic men are still making it past the casting process, but I guess that it's intentional at this point, but that's a story for another video. Back to David. The first thing he tells us when he's introduced is that he has always been superficial about women's looks, which is rather typical for delusional men who are as wonderbread basic as they come. His future fiancée, Lauren, introduces herself to him, adding that she's 32 years old, only to be met with the most glaring red flag of a response that David could have come up with. So you're no longer attractive. For some godforsaken reason, Lauren doesn't take this misogynistic incel talking point as a cue to leave this guy, and we see him continue to insult her and other women on various dates as well, continually asking them what is wrong with them that they end up in the pods. This is something that may seem innocuous, but David's particular brand of toxic masculinity features these thinly veiled insults that can be passed off as jokes, but are meant to slowly break down his victim's confidence over time. Unsurprisingly enough, Lauren isn't the only woman with low self-esteem that continues to give David the time of day. She will be competing against Pick Me Molly for his affection throughout their time in the pods. When we get a glimpse into David's relationship with Molly, there's a moment where he tells her that he really likes her, and I couldn't help but think of her as the prime target for abusers. Someone with zero relationship experience, glaringly low self-esteem, and a desperation to be chosen. The girl was shouting from the rooftops about having found her husband from the very first day and continued on every chance she got. The secondhand embarrassment she gave me was off the charts. Imagine bragging about potentially getting stuck with a man that quite literally hates women. Was their connection ever that deep? Molly led with X in her dates with Dave, to the surprise of no one. Also, to the surprise of no one, the clear woman hater sees himself as a dom, which is the perfect excuse for misogynists to beat and degrade women, and for women suffering from male trauma and internalized misogyny to accept misogyny and abuse under the guise of kink. It felt as though David and Molly were trying their hardest to prove to us all just how cliche they are this entire episode, as Dave announces to Molly that he cheated on his ex. Surprise, surprise. And our resident pick-me admits that she was once a desperate mistress, hoping that the guy she was hooking up with would eventually leave his girlfriend for her. Spoiler alert, he didn't. One thing about the Love is Blind girlies is that they'll never let a cheating confession stand in the way of their desperation to wed. Time and time again, we see them continue on in relationships with admitted cheaters, only to end up getting played in the end. Shout out to Monica from season 7. As much as I can't stand David, I've got to admit that he's been doing a good job of showing us how low self-esteem manifests in different ways. Molly's version of it is extreme pick-me-ness, hyperactuality, and a willingness to be a mistress, with the hopes of eventually being promoted to girlfriend. But Lauren's brand of it is allowing a man to tell her that she's no longer attractive at 32 years old and that she'd better pop out some quickly because her time is running out. David may try to come across as though he's really confident, but it's clear as day that he's got cripplingly low self-worth in the way that he needs to chip away at women's self-esteem until it's low enough that they would settle for him as a partner. By episode 4, David realizes that he ran off many potential matches with his raging misogyny, so he decides to show a little bit of contrition. He tells Molly that he regrets leading his dates with insults like, "What's wrong with you?" and asks her what type of engagement ring she'd like, obviously hinting that he was ready to pop the question. Upon hearing the news, back in the ladies' chamber, a furious Lauren makes her way to the pods to ask David how he could possibly be playing with 2 women like this. Honestly, David was probably wondering the same thing himself. The other 14 women had the sense to drop him like a bad habit when he clearly showed them that he had no respect for women, yet 2 still stuck around? Jackpot. Of course, he was going to continue milking the female interaction for as long as possible. He probably rarely gets any play outside of the pods, yet alone women fighting over him. The 2 lovebirds then cry about her attachment to him, and he tells her that he never actually told Molly that she was his number one. And he also tells Lauren that she's the only one that he's even considered proposing to. Yet he just asked Molly what type of ring she'd like. Strange. David and Lauren then start saying that Molly has been exaggerating the depth of his relationship with her. And at this point, I start wondering, am I in the Twilight Zone, or is he a master manipulator and a habitual liar too? David tells the guys that Lauren was always his number one, but now he's confused. And then he cries about it to Molly on their date. He then dumps Molly because she's too easygoing / one of the guys type of girl. How sad for her after all of that bragging from day one about finding her husband. Men never go for the pick-me's, no matter how hard the girls try or how much men talk about women needing to bend to their will, be submissive. They'd rather break down a woman themselves than deal with an already colonized one. Freshly single, David takes the opportunity to propose to Lauren and, in true David fashion, disses her to her face at their big reveal with another comment that might seem innocent enough, but is really meant as an insult. You see, in episode 3, David told the audience that he'd typically never date a teacher because teachers tend to be nerdy and unattractive. So when he sat up in Lauren's face and said, "You know what? You do look like a teacher," that was a diss. He was telling her that she's not that cute. And in the preview of episodes to come from the honeymoon, he tells her that he likes everything about her except her hair. Another comment that could potentially be seen as just lighthearted honesty or humor, added to a growing pile of insults that eventually cause victims to lose confidence in themselves and settle for their abusive partner. When you take a step back and look at the whole picture, you see that David has insulted women on every single episode of the show so far, 6 total, and shows no sign of stopping. He joked about them being too old to be attractive, having something wrong with them for being single, running out of time to have children, female teachers being unattractive, and plenty more. I fear that Lauren will end this season a shell of her former self after making the misguided decision to agree to marriage with David. Women need to learn to leave at the first red flag because behavior like this only gets worse, never better. These men know that what they're doing is wrong, and they only continue in order to test your boundaries and see if you're desperate enough to accept their mistreatment. And sadly enough, as Love is Blind shows us every single season, there are always women desperate enough to accept such bad behavior. How did you feel about David as you watched the first 6 episodes of the show go by? Let me know in the comment section down below. And don't forget, I will be analyzing plenty more cast members as the season progresses. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on a single analysis.